Did you know there was ancient trade between the Egyptians and the Orientals, even back at the time of Ramses and so on? Well, let me enlighten you a little bit about it. On October 5th, 1956, a movie was made in color at a cost of $13 million. It was called The Ten Commandments. Perhaps you've seen it. It's about the Bible, with the main stars being Charlton Heston as Moses, Sir Cedric Hardwicke as Seti the First, Yul Brynner as Ramses II, Anne Baxter as Nefertari, and Yvonne DiCarlo as Moses' eventual wife Sephora. I did a recent video where I showed a clip where I was talking about volcano gods, and if you watch the video clip where it shows Moses and Sephora, he talks about the volcano god behind him there, and he says he is awake tonight. And this is right before she describes the Egyptians and the Egyptian lady that he had fallen in love with. And she says, because we work outside so much, we're not as light-skinned as the Egyptians are. And this lady of Egypt that tried to steal his heart was pale with green eyes and so on. Anyhow, regardless, during the movie, The Ten Commandments, in one segment, the Pharaoh of Egypt, Seti I, receives a gift from one of the many visiting diplomats from foreign lands. He gives the Pharaoh a gift of a long, bright, beautifully made red silk cloak, claiming it as a gift of the gods that has no thread seams. It was all woven out of one piece. It wasn't stitched together or anything, or the people were able to only make pieces and put it together, quite often as those were. It was something extravagantly made and sent to him in that way. Was there any truth to somebody like Seti and the people that were in the Ten Commandments in that time possibly getting silk from somewhere? Because the Silk Road and Marco Polo were far, far off. Well, specimens of ancient Chinese silk, recognizable from the high level of Chinese sophisticated weaving techniques only possessed, apparently, by the Chinese from the Shang dynasty circa 1600 BC to about 1046 BC, were found in the Valley of the Egyptian Kings in a tomb dating from 1070 BC during the death, or in the tomb, of Ramses IX. This period in Egyptian history ended with the New Kingdom and was eventually followed by what's considered to be the Late Period. Here we see Yul Brynner, and you notice how she's pale and he's much darker. Well, that often happens in Caucasians, and so with their art that they used back in the time all over the Mediterranean, you'll see that where women are drawn a little bit more pale and men are drawn with up to red ochre darkness on them. And there's a symbology with that, especially if they're in action. They're doing something and doing something important. But of course, nobility and women, by the time agriculture kicked and everything else, were able to be kept inside and didn't have to toil so much anymore. And if you got to a certain level, of course she didn't, and so she would stay much more pale. People wonder why in the Middle East they have women clothed so much over there and everything, but it's also part of it is to keep them pale. The other part of it is to keep you from looking at their women and so on. But Yul Brynner could be much darker than this right here for sure. And his eyes could actually be blue, along with hers being blue or green. Though they could have been brown, they easily could have been blue. Now this silk that they found, this occurrence of it would be within Min Matari Seti I, a pharaoh of the new kingdom of the 19th dynasty. So just following the 18th dynasty with King Tut, and Akhenaten, and so on, and carrying through. The son of Ramses first, or Ramses the first, and Sitri, and the father of Ramses the second. Pharaoh Seti was born in 1323 BC and died in 1279 BC. In fact, silk was given by high government officials to Egyptian royalty in ancient times. It was believed that early land and sea trade routes coined the Silk Road by German explorer Baron Ferdinand von Richthofen in 1877 connected several countries with Europe, notably Italy with Japan, China, and the Orient for thousands of years. Many land routes were often poor roads, some traversing great mountains difficult to travel, plagued by thieving bandits and hostile tribes. This is the story of highwaymen, which happened very many places, that eventually became the reason for Templars. And I'm sure these larger merchants would have had a throng of protection going along with them. There are some stories of this ideal, but people always shunt it off and they go, well, they didn't go all the way, did they? A lot of people believe that they would meet people halfway. Well, who are the halfway people? Well, they're the ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans. Unless you're going around the sea, and if you're going around the sea, that would have probably been India. Both of them are possible, and both of them are noted that they were known at the time. But these brigands or highwaymen would try to take your stuff either on the way or on the way back. Voyage by sea was another uncertainty too. Storms, primitive ship construction, and even pirates. So there's highwaymen on the highway of the ocean and rivers. Ever hear of Shanghaiing? However, the trade industry was a prosperous one that included silk, cotton, tea, jade, porcelain, ivory, gold, silver, and horses. Egypt is not widely known for trade with China as the ancient Romans were, but the discovery of Chinese silk from the days of the great pharaohs is a certainty. This picture you're looking at here at the bottom is a pupa that's been killed. They boil it, basically, after they get these. And that's not the part that's important. It's the cocoon on the outside. And you might see some fibrous threads hanging off of it. And if you can find the end of that fibrous thread and then collectively and real carefully pull it all apart, you'll get a thread, which they put three and put together. And then they weave all of this, and this makes your silk sheets and things that everybody knows of today. It only comes from a mulberry tree. Whenever I was a kid, I got a telescope. Well, it was me and my brother and so on. Not telescope, microscope. Me and my brother, and it came with all these slides with them that you could look at things under, you know, that they had different stuff. And one of the things was mulberry pollen. And you might think that would be kind of bland looking, but when you looked at it under the microscope, it looked like fireworks. It was pretty cool. They had different wings of certain kinds of flies and things, and they had a bunch of slides, and we made our own off of finding a fly in the windowsill and then getting the idea. They had the glue and the little glass plates and the whole 9 yards. When silk fabric was invented by the Chinese, it was a great secret, punishable by death if revealed. For thousands of years, China's mystery was protected until Chinese silk producers were threatened to die 1,000 deaths, slow, torturous, painful death by armed men if they did not talk. Silk comes from worms, these silkworms. The silkworm is the larva or caterpillar of a silk moth. Silkworms are found on mulberry tree leaves, which they eat. That's their exclusive food, by the way. For some reason, the worms only eat mulberry leaves, and quite often that is the way with a lot of these moths. For you'll find that there are bagworms here in Texas, and that's actually just these little crap moths, but they'll get in certain trees, and not even in others whatsoever, because it's the diet they'll eat, and they know whenever they land and they make themselves into the cocoon, they do it right there. So whenever they pop out, well, before they make the cocoon, they eat that certain food, but whenever they pop out, they're in that place at home. They require that food to make their cocoon. It's kind of the only thing they eat. Kind of like pandas only eat bamboo. Silkworms will start to pupate in the cocoons that they have made on the trees, and silk hunters pluck the cocoons off trees and put the cocoons in boiling hot water, which dissolves them. Then individual long silk fibers are extracted and sewed into silk fabrics. Silk production involves the killing of these silkworms. Roughly 3,000 are killed basically to make a single pound of silk. Silk is delicate, stringy substance, extremely soft and lusterful, shiny. It's carefully gathered and then wounded up tightly so it is strong enough to make clothes out of, though. The process is expensive and silkworms are rare and hard to find. Well, if you have a mulberry farm, tree farm, it can become a whole lot easier. According to ancient Chinese legend, the Yellow Emperor Huangdi, who was regarded as a deity, and his wife, Empress Sai Lingxi, were having tea. Silk threads were accidentally discovered when a silkworm cocoon dropped into her teacup of Empress Xi. And because it's hot tea or whatever, she found the cocoon and unraveled to yield about 3,300 feet, or basically a kilometer. This is all made out of one single thread, and much of the way if you've ever watched a spider build his web, after they do that initial crisscross that's in there, quite often that inner part is all in one constant stripe. And garden spiders, that can be over 100 yards. Well, this cocoon that's all woven all up, it's more than a kilometer, about a half a mile. The Yellow Emperor was born in 2712 BC, and Xuanku died in 2599 BC, giving us a clue to about how long silk has been produced into China. In this picture you can find there's this woman here, and she doesn't even have a magnifying glass helping her out, trying to find the starting thread of it. The sign over there on the side says, "Don't take my cocoons." Likewise, in old Neolithic India, by the way, within the Indus Valley civilization, there was some type of silk production utilizing the Anathera moth. The discovery of certain Stone Age tools have been found for silk producing. However, historians claim there were various problems, particularly in the weaving process, and their silk was highly inferior, not as good. The ancient Chinese learned how to conquer these obstacles and produce beautiful, highly professional, extremely skillfully made silk items on an extraordinary scale. I showed earlier this year that there was a silk pillow that was found in a Western European burial also. So this stuff gets around, and it makes you wonder how many hands it passed through and how these people were revered by the others to have gotten something so special and to turn around and give it away to somebody else to show them that you were giving them something very special. It's pretty wicked. Also, that concept that India was already making silk before that time shows you that the idea of doing it may have not come from them in the first place, but they found something and it may have worked out a whole lot better. There's a connective people that knew both of these people in India and China, and we've talked a lot about them. Let me know what you think about finding out about this silk. I wish they would have shown some of the little pictures of it, but really it's just little frazzles and so on. And then, well, what is that? That's actual silk. Yeah, just like the robes and everything, and like the robe they talked about. In fact, it's possible that they took that robe, and for some reason, and everybody wanted it, well, they cut it up into pieces and utilized it for nobility to have their extra little special thing. You get a piece of it too. You get a piece of it too. Peace.